Again, delegations, with your concurrence, let me invite the representative of the Arctic region of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Arctic Indigenous Caucus is extremely pleased that negotiations on an outcome document of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples now commence in earnest. Our gratitude goes to all those that have contributed to us reaching this stage of the deliberations. The Arctic Caucus aligns itself with the joint cross-regional statement of the regions of Africa, Arctic, Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, the Pacific and Russia, and would like to offer these additional views, which, Mr. President, will include 4 concrete elements that we think could be the concise, action-oriented outcome document that you have asked for. Allow me, please, first, though, to say that the Arctic Caucus warmly welcomes the appointment of Dr. Myrna Cunningham and Mr. Les Malleser as 2 of your 4 advisors in the process. Mr. President, please rest assured that the Indigenous peoples of the Arctic will do our best to assist you and your team in this process. Mr. President, as we enter the final deliberations on an outcome document with only a little bit more than 3 months to go to the World Conference, the preparatory process has so far produced 1 draft outcome document, General Assembly Document A/67/994, also known as the ALTA Outcome Document. The status and importance of this document has been acknowledged and highlighted by the Third Committee, the Human Rights Council, the UN Special Rapporteur on Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Group of 77 plus China has also recommended that GIA Document A/67/994 be taken into account when drafting an outcome document of the World Conference. Of course, the 7 geopolitical Indigenous peoples regions, including the Indigenous peoples of the Arctic, have also unanimously adopted the ALTA outcome document as their position on an outcome document of the World Conference. Against this background, Mr. President, the Arctic Caucus strongly recommends that you and your advisors, as you guide us through this preparatory process, identify the material outcomes of the World Conference in the ALTA outcome document, in keeping with the modalities resolution, which provides that views that emerge from the preparatory process shall be taken into account when drafting the outcome document. In doing so, the Arctic Caucus recommends that the following paragraphs of the ALTA outcome document form basis of an outcome document of the World Conference. And here comes our 4 concrete proposals for the concrete action-oriented outcome document, Mr. President. 1, to be drawn from Theme 2, Paragraph 1 of the ALTA outcome document. This paragraph calls for the establishment of an international oversight mechanism that promotes respect for and the implementation of Indigenous peoples' human rights. The Arctic Caucus has in other processes referred to this body as an optional protocol to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In this context, we would like to draw your attention to that the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has recently decided to organize a 3-day expert seminar to deliberate on how such an optional protocol could be established. That was our first concrete proposal. Concrete proposal number 2. Theme 1, paragraphs 1, 3, 5, 8, and theme 3, paragraphs 1 and 14 of the ALTA outcome document. All these paragraphs calls for implementation mechanisms to be established on a national level to further respect for and ensure compliance with Indigenous peoples' human rights, in particular through constructive arrangements between Indigenous peoples and states, and with a particular focus on land and resource rights and the right to self-determination. We believe that these paragraphs can usefully be consolidated into one recommendation in the outcome document, calling for establishment of such national mechanisms. Concrete proposal number 3. Theme 2, paragraph 4 of the outcome document. This paragraph calls for the appointment of an Undersecretary General for Indigenous Peoples in order to strengthen the capacity and efforts of the UN, ensuring the full realization of the rights of Indigenous peoples. And then finally, the 4th and final concrete proposal, Theme 2, paragraph 10. This paragraph calls on the UN system to award Indigenous peoples with permanent observer status. That was our 4 concrete proposals for the assistance of you, Mr. President, and your advisors. Finally, the Arctic Caucus recommends that the GI document A/67/994, that is the ALTA outcome document, be annexed to the outcome document of the World Conference in order to reflect all Indigenous peoples' position in the World Conference process. Thank you, Mr. President.